Hello, this is Zach Brown, and today I wanted to take a look at this article written by Keon Rami, or Rami, from SUNY New Paltz Journal of Psychology. It's titled Playing with Pain, a literature review of tabletop role-playing games, role-playing games in therapy and their treatment of trauma and PTSD. Which is a topic that I've become increasingly interested in as somebody who wants to start veterans programs for exactly this trauma, PTSD, and CPSD through role playing, essentially. So when we're reading this, I'll probably read a piece, give my thoughts. And as a part of this, I am a veteran of 6 years in the United States Navy. I am not retired. I am separated now from service. And I've also been a dungeon master for over a decade. So I think these things kind of have these things hit a crossroads where it's like, I think this is something that could really help both veterans and even civilians with their trauma, PTSD, and CPSD. But this is definitely something I want to explore further. This article is written by Keon Rami. I've reached out to them. They go to school in New Paltz. I believe they have a master's right now. They're either pursuing their master's. I've reached out to them. Hopefully, this is something. I'm curious about their thoughts on how this would affect veterans specifically, if they have any ideas on that. But we'll see. Maybe we'll have a conversation on this channel in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and read the abstract. Complex trauma and trauma-aligned disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder and complex PTSD, CPSD, have been surrounded by a debate about the treatment guidelines that are often prescribed for their symptoms. One of the treatments that has been researched but seems to be underutilized is exposure therapy in the form of role-playing games or RPGs and the many ways of playing them. Though many treatments have been found to be effective, some alternative interventions have been researched and recommended as well in order to help others with reduced access to mental health resources. There is evidence that many of the techniques used in RPGs, specifically tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, can be utilized in a therapeutic setting in order to effectively treat PTSD and complex trauma. Some of these techniques include imaginal exposure, group therapy interaction, emotional regulation skills, and social skill teaching. These skills are helpful in treating the issues that may arise in PTSD and CPTSD patients. So exactly, kind of the thing I was basically exactly what I was talking about. And I think this works because one of the things that helps a lot of cluster B disorders is DBT. And what DBT is dialectical based testing, behavior therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy. Look, I'm not a doctor, okay. I'm bound to get some of these acronyms wrong, but I think it's dialectic behavioral therapy. And what this does is it's supposed to be you basically meet in a group and work on skills that help you cope with the symptoms around your personality, cluster B or whatever else, personality disorder or mood disorder or behavioral disorder. And I think Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games in general, they allow the opportunity to explore and build these skills while also gamifying it. And I think that's very valuable. That's a very valuable thing because gamification works for so many other things like sales. People are just playing games in general right now. And it kind of you would kind of forget and lose yourself in the game rather than sitting there kind of focusing, like, hey, what's up, guys? Hi, John. What are you here for today? Alcohol. Okay, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your alcohol addiction? Uh, it's just not fun. that part's just not fun. And I think a lot of people that have played Dungeons and Dragons in the past, or have tried it. One, I think a lot of people who are interested in trying Dungeons and Dragons from my 10 years tenure over playing online, offline, a lot of these people do have. Um, I, f- uh, I have noticed that the people who trend towards the game tend to have more psychological issues. More psychological issues than not. Not to say if you're playing D&D, you have problems, but I think you are drawn to it more if you do have some sort of dysregulatory condition that disinhibits you from living, a neurotypical life. So yeah, let's keep going. Introduction. Gaming, whether in person or virtually, has been a pastime that many individuals of varying ages engage in. While video games are popular, one gaming system has been rising back to popularity in the past few decades. Dungeons & Dragons, a role-playing game where individuals embody a character that they create, has an estimated 50 million players that gather around a table once a week to tell a story and slay dragons. I would like to contend this. Not anything regarding the number. I don't know how many people are playing. I would just say it has been rising in popularity. I don't know if I could for sure say back to popularity. I think Dungeons and Dragons has always been kind of an underground thing, and now it's kind of moving into the mainstream with things like Critical Role and Stranger Things, Dimension 20, obviously. Uh, it is it has exposure that it has not had in the past. And its past exposure was even more of an infamous thing where I think it what do they call it? Like the devil scare or like Christian scare. Like people really thought you were like summoning demons in Dungeons and Dragons. So like the Satanist crowd really got into it. The goth crowd really got into it, and then the kind of the mainstream rejected it because it just wasn't Christian. But now I think it's very normal for any group of friends to just have somebody who's running Dungeons and Dragons games, especially if you're theater kids, especially if you're working in tech, especially if you're working in STEM in general, because I mean it just tends to draw a crowd of thinkers and engineers and stuff like that, and people who introverts and people who don't usually get out much. It does also draw some extroverts, but for the most part, the theater kids and the engineers really like the D&D, and there's we got a lot of those. Also, it doesn't have to be once a week. You don't have to meet at tables once a week. I mean, you can meet once a month. You can meet once every 2 weeks. You don't have to tell a story. Something railroad. Not everybody plays for the same reasons, but I understand for the article, this is the experience that they're trying to convey. I would just hope that we understand that even though this is like the typical kind of game, that there's nuance in the way people run their own home games. Like it doesn't always have to be once a week. It could be bi-weekly. You could schedule every time. So, and I hope it doesn't feel like nitpicking, but it's just I want to make that clarification. Due to this gaming, continuing on, due to this gaming experience fosters community, connection, and collaboration. Individuals in the therapeutic community found Dungeons and Dragons to be a new tool they could implement. While the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons rises, another statistic has also been steadily rising: the amount of people in the US that have been diagnosed with a trauma disorder. Trauma disorders like post traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD have been noted to be increasing in prevalence. According to National Center for PTSD, almost 13 million had PTSD this year. That's a substantial amount. I think that's 3%. Yeah, it's like 3 or 2% of the population. Women are also more likely to be diagnosed with PTSD, with a prevalence rate of about 8%. Although there are many evidence-based practices for just treating diagnosis, I'm wondering about that women statistic. I'm wondering how much of that is women are more likely to seek therapy and probably also more likely to admit the problems and also talk about their problems. Because I would bet that whatever the number for males is that it's underrepresented. Although there are many evidence-based practices for this treating diagnosis, access to resources and treatment may be extremely scarce for people seeking help, yes. Even with the advent of telehealth, people still struggle to receive therapeutic help. Symptoms of PTSD and CPTSD can make people feel isolated, upset, and scared of the future and others, making it increasingly hard to ask for help or work through the traumatic experience. Although this access issue and interpersonal issue may be hard to work with, the increasing usage of TTRPGs may provide a much-needed solution for the therapeutic community and clients alike. Through the imaginal exposure provided by TTRPGs, the interpersonal group setting, and a guiding hand from the therapist or game master, or both maybe in one, Dungeons & Dragons therapy can become an effective and worthwhile alternative for individuals struggling with PTSD and CPTSD. I agree with this wholeheartedly. I think that the cost is very much an issue. One of the things that I'm willing to explore is that maybe this could be covered by TRICARE. And if it's not covered by TRICARE, maybe there can be government-funded programs that, provide access to basically qualified therapeutic game masters to run their veterans to scenarios. And I think this is going to be team building. I think this can provide so many important skills: team building, skills building, rehabilitative, just so many things, social, like providing them an outlet to just hang out too, is very important. There's a lot of people that are lonely these days. So all of these things are so important. Trauma is clinically defined as being exposed to an event that is life-threatening or excessively violent. I'm kind of going to skim to parts that specifically reference the games, because this seems to be like just a definition of trauma, which is fine. I'm going to skip that section. Role-playing in therapy. Oh yes, this is a point that I wanted to bring up earlier, is that we actually do role-playing a lot of the time in therapy and in skills building. Like, if you're taking a sales course, you might be like, all right, I'm going to be on the other end of this call. You call in and use the script that we have. And then any objections, I want you to use the objections, the things we trained on in order to get kind of past those objections and make the sale. In the same vein, DBT can be sort of a role-playing gesture, as well as just role-playing exercises in therapy in general. Okay, so I'm gonna be your wife, and you're gonna set the boundary that you've been wanting to set with your wife this whole time. That is a very normal scenario, and I think being completely immersed, giving you chances to build more context around the one conversation and kind of exist in another world, I think that is, one of the things that makes it a very unique and dynamic and, just expressive way of doing these things, of creating the therapy that, veterans and other people need. So, role-playing in therapy. The activity of role-playing has been used in many modalities of therapy, with some early uses in Gestalt therapy and drama therapy or psychodrama. Historically, role-playing has been used in play and drama therapy in many ways. It has been considered useful in treating trauma. In Gestalt therapy, role-play is integrated into treatment with the usage of techniques like the empty chair technique and a Rorschach role-play. The empty chair technique entails on taking the role of a figure created from the ground out of need. This figure is then taken on, whether it be a person or something else. This form of role-playing integrates many parts of fantasy and engages in psychodramatic technique of role-play in order to aid the client in reaching a higher awareness of themselves and the issues they may be struggling with. Beliefs in Gestalt therapy historically have aligned with the thought of fantasy characters and settings that could be representations of the self, not unlike many psychodynamically aligned theories at the time. Fantastical elements of storytelling have been utilized in multiple types of roleplay for therapeutic usages. This is such an interesting thing because it kind of mirrors the character creation process of tabletop RPGs. You are kind of creating this something out of nothing. You're giving it life, you're giving it stats, you're giving it skills, you're giving it weaknesses. And all of these things kind of combine to create this imaginative, yet very real to you character that you can now use as an avatar to start to express yourself in ways that you can't do in your waking life. I think that's very when focusing on psychodrama, this modality was designed with live action roleplay, LARPing in mind. Roleplay's usage in psychodramatic spaces has revolved around the theatrical nature of the roleplay, and that its immersive nature will provide a healing closure for patients. This is stuff I've been talking about. Through role-playing carries connotations of being part of acting in theater, there's been evidence showing role-play as being used as a ritual for healing in psychological treatment RPG space, or psychological treatment period. With specific differences in the type of imaginal roleplay, there's been a recent focus on fantasy in the RPG space, while conventional theater and most play spaces encourage a more lifelike and realistic version of role-playing in children and adults. I think comedians do this a lot. One podcast that I watch often is the Rick Glassman podcast. And the episodes where he has on either Ben Schwartz or Lisa Gilroy, and sometimes a lot of the other comedians, but specifically Lisa Gilroy, they move in and out of different roleplay scenarios, which makes it probably nearly incoherent to watch. Like, you wouldn't be able to understand it unless you're watching it, like the actual video. But they will just move through these scenarios so easily and just pick up off one of them, what one is doing, and then instantly create an alternate reality where they're starting to do something. They're starting to tell some sort of story. That being said, I think that says that they're like just expert role players. I think they would be very good at doing things like exercises like these and a lot of improv, drama role play. I think Lisa Gilroy is probably very experienced in drama role play as well, which is why it translates so well, is that the choices she makes are realistic. And I think a lot of comedy is based off realism. Like, there's some absurdist stuff out there, but a lot of comedy is just like, this is the actual scenario, but through a lens that somebody hasn't seen before. Through role playing carries connotation part of acting theater. Okay, with specific differences in the type of imaginal role play, there's been a recent focus on fantasy in the RPG space. While conventional theater and most play spaces encourage a more lifelike and realistic role playing, that's what we said before. In drama therapy, one of the most used references to role play and theatrical technique used in therapeutic spaces is a writer named Moreno. Okay. Moreno believed that LARPing and role-play in therapy were useful techniques and often argued for their uses to be more widespread in a therapeutic community. So I'm not sure who this Moreno is. Maybe it's the Mendoza 2020. They are citing this as an authority. I have not read that other study, so I can't support or not support whatever they're advocating for here and Moreno's thoughts. Role-playing has also been utilized in CBT spaces when working with trauma as therapy that can be used in tandem with play therapy when working with two survivors of sexual abuse that, after confiding, their perpetrator committed suicide. Jacobs, or self-deletion, I don't know. Jacobs observed the empowerment and help that roleplay provided for both of the young patients. The violent and continued nature of this event was a complex trauma for the two children. Whatever, I'm just going to say suicide. I'm not going to monetize. I don't care. Treating it with roleplay and therapy yielded results showing its effectiveness. While the older of the two took on a teaching role that seemed to help her in making meaning of what happened to her, the younger overcoming trust issues in the process she displayed. I think this is what this is saying is that in the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, there were two survivors. Okay, I don't know why I made them siblings, but two survivors. And it seemed to have helped understand how they could think about it in a way that allowed them to live life in a more productive way for themselves. The usage of role-playing games, or RPGs, has also been studied in both an online and in-person group setting. Mendoza-McKay describes RPGs as episodic and participatory story creation system that includes a set of quantified rules that assist a group of players and a game master in determining how their fictional characters' spontaneous interactions are resolved. Hold on. I have to download Mass Effect Andromeda. So I'm going to start that download right now. Because what I just realized is that I have to play it. Sorry. I'm writing a Mass Effect Andromeda fan novel. So now I have to play it in order to understand what's going on in there. All right, I started the download. Okay. Is that ADHD or what? No, I'm kidding. I don't believe it. Where am I? Fictional character spontaneous resolve. RPGs have been most well observed in modern literature in the online space, with most RPGs being video games usable by computer, console, or VR headset. I don't agree with VR headset at all. RPG video games, yeah, like there's so many games on. I don't think it's PC and console. Like just any avenue is you can have RPGs on them, but it PC essentially. It boils down to PC is the most popular. These games provide worlds for their players to enter, often as an escape from the real world, or to confront problems that seem daunting in a way that feels less frightening. I agree with one. I agree with these games provide worlds for players to enter, often as an escape from the real world. Yes, I think a lot of things are an escape from the real world. But specifically saying to confront problems that seem daunting in a way that feel less frightening, I can't agree with that. I can't agree that somebody picks up a controller and goes, you know what? Today I really wanted to smash goblins because I want to smash people. See, I want to smash people in my real life, and this is way less frightening. I think the frightening part and less daunting part is like what I would mostly disagree with. Yeah, people go on to de-stress. Like people go on to COD zombies and then shoot some zombies, and then they're just shooting zombies, and that helps them feel a little bit better that they're destroying something. People go on and confuse their self-worth with their in-game ranks. People go on and like before they go on for an escape and go into a world that isn't their own. I can't say people intentionally pick up the controller and say, this feels less frightening than in my real life. Now I can confront this. A lot of the times with narrative and story-based games that you still feel very strong emotions. So I just can't agree with it. And then sometimes it's stronger emotions than you would feel in real life. So I can't. A study conducted by Alexanian Davis found that individuals who worked with individuals they worked with that suffered from PTSD, anxiety disorders, and phobias benefited from the use of VR avatars in a roleplay setting. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna contradict what I just said. That second part, for social anxiety and using VR chat, I have seen people use VR chat in a way to socialize without the social anxiety, because somebody can just be two completely different people inside VR chat and outside VR chat. So I think, and then people will intentionally use it that way. So to contradict myself from 2 minutes ago, but I just feel like outside of that specific usage, like specifically for social, maybe not for. I would tag a big maybe not, and then for RPGs I would tag a very no. User roleplay setting, utilizing a long-term virtual observation of the participants in their VR world, chat and text log coding, and in-depth interviews. The researchers gathered a rich data set. Participants revealed a methodology of contending with their trauma that was not unlike some roleplay therapy used in modern therapies. With older participants utilizing a child VR avatar to model and experience a healthy parent-child relationship they may not have experienced beforehand in their life. The immersion and structure of these virtual worlds provided a place for virtual adoption centers, a place where people can have a model family online they role-played healthy relationships in. This same role-playing exposure has been used in tabletop role-playing games, where the interactions now take place in person. Okay, no. Here's one thing I don't know about, is people role-playing as model families. I don't know that. This same role-playing exposure has been used in tabletop role-playing games where the interactions now take place in person. I can't get behind that, dude. Most people's D&D character also has trauma and not a loving household that you just get dropped into and then you just play house. That is not it, dude. Most D&D characters is an orphan, has had their family, offed, has been to war, has come back from war, has survived some things, is, in contact with a demon. Yeah, that's just not, I can't agree with that last sentence there. But if people are going into doing like these virtual adoption centers, like I haven't seen it myself, that sounds interesting. I'm curious about the effects of that and whether it helps people reframe their early experiences. But yeah, no, I can't agree with that last sentence. TTRPGs and Dungeons and Dragons in therapy. Tabletop role-playing games, or TTRPGs, have been popular within adolescent and emerging adult spaces since their inception, with the most popular game under this umbrella being Dungeons and Dragons. These games are RPGs in a slightly different format, one that utilizes a pen and paper format, and has an element of improvisation and community to its playstyle. D&D can also be described as a collaborative storytelling experience, where players and their characters interact directly with the game master to create character arcs, compelling moments in the present. D&D can also be described as a collaborative storytelling experience. Yes. So yes. The way some people play D&D, that's what it can be. The way other people play D&D, it could just be a dungeon dive where you just gain XP and loot stuff. It just depends on the actual game that you're playing, but my games do tend to be collaborative storytelling experiences. I would hesitate to categorize it as one thing, even though I know the one thing is very important for what this paper is trying to convey. So I guess my feedback for whenever trying to like paint down one specific thing, I would just like I would just say this is one way, and not have, if somebody doesn't know about Dungeons and Dragons, this is the first paper they're reading, they might not be aware of other ways that the game can be played. That would be my only criticism of that. In this game, a player character or PCs create characters and choose among some established. Okay, this is okay. Okay, they're creating character creation. We don't have to get into character creation. In D&D, players will interact with the GM to create a story in an improvisational performance setting. Sometimes there are some games that are just dungeon dives, utilizing the character voices established. Okay, you don't have to do voices. You don't have to do voices. A GM will set the scene and describe the setting. The non-player characters or NPCs. Okay, so this is just describing Dungeons and Dragons in general. I'm gonna see if they. Oh, Satanic Panic. That's what it was called. So, due to incident involving a student's death, claims were made about the satanic nature of D&D. It was called the Satanic Panic, and that was in the 70s. And that probably gave more sales than it removed. Just like when people really hated J.K. Rowling when Hogwarts Legacy was coming out, and they were like, boycott the game, and it was like one of the best-selling games of all time. So, people love Harry Potter, man. Okay, Satanic Panic. Let's skip to. In various pieces of literature, there's been contention about how roleplay can be used as either treatment or also interpreted as a piece of escapism. Some literature on the usage of D&D in therapeutic spaces has observed the TTRPG as a self-treatment or self-medicating strategy, utilizing the stories as a proxy to real-life situations and sometimes enjoying the escapism that group roleplay will enable. This is a big one. Utilizing stories as a proxy to real-life situations. So this is what I'm talking about, where like the transference occurs onto the DM, where some people will see their ex-lover, some people will see their father, some people will see their mother, and sometimes the interactions can get volatile. The interactions become emotionally charged very quickly, and it'll come out of nowhere. And it's not actually coming out of nowhere because it has a source. And the source is you basically have tiptoed onto and then open the door to somebody's formative experiences and how they filter and observe the world. So when that's happening, they're not talking to their game master, or they might not even be role playing their character at that point. They are reliving and kind of living in. There's some sort of feedback loop or reliving something from their past, and this does happen in games, and that's why a lot of the games utilize safety tools now, is to not accidentally get into that situation. And I think with using it as a therapeutic tool, I think is something that can be gracefully explored as long as all parties are aware, willing, and able to perform that exploration, if that makes sense. Basically, I think this is a good thing that it proxies real life situations, but I think it has to be done in a manner that benefits, the person who who has experienced the PTSD or CPTSD and trying to rehabilitate. Some major examples of more complete study done on D&D in therapeutic spaces include Asherman, Blackmon. Okay, these studies utilize different psychotherapies techniques and emerge from different perspectives in various time periods of psychology. D&D was studied in therapeutic studies in the early 90s. I didn't know that, by two clinicians, Asherman and Blackmon. Asherman was studying the negative effects that this unknown game may have had. He remarked on the nature of the game being quite complex and hard to follow. Okay. There was also the thought that game's nature encouraged escapism, that led him to believe that playing D&D will also encourage violence, resistance to therapy, and reinforce maladaptive thoughts. This thought process was one of the first works to address the use of D&D in therapeutic spaces, with the clients forming a group that played inside the psychiatric ward from which he worked with and his staff. Dude, that game was probably crazy. Literally. That game was fucking. There's just 4 people in straitjackets. Like, I rolled a hit. Oh, man. Basically, this is Dimension 20. This is just Brennan Lee Mulligan's game. In Asherman's specific case, the depth of the game and degree of immersion seem to come across as negative characteristics, which ends up being at odds with some of the later literature on the observation and use of D&D. Later, Blackmon had a case study on a client named Fred, who Blackmon described as having an obsessive schizoid personality, and he detailed how D&D was utilized as a psychodynamic tool to allow Fred's unconscious to be interpreted and released. Using psychodynamic theory, Blackmon argued for the usage of the fantastical nature of D&D and the role-playing aspect being projective features that can lead to client progress. Thinking D&D could provide a form and structure to his patient's unconscious thought, Blackmon utilized the principle of waking dream and the structure of fairy tale storytelling in therapy in order to effectively treat and help Fred with his personality issues. In one example, Blackmon discussed the motivations behind his character's actions, which lead to some movement and progress in their therapeutic work. So this, one thing I was very interested in and had not even considered is the opposite, where somebody writing that escapism is bad, which I do agree with. I don't like escapism. The game being complex and hard to follow, maybe at the time, yeah. But also thinking that the game, because it puts you in this alternate escape, that it could support or reinforce tendencies that make you more violent, make you resistant to therapy, and reinforce maladaptive thoughts. That is something I had not considered, and I will continue to consider. I don't really have thoughts on it right now, being this is the first time I've encountered it. But I would love to explore kind of maybe the negative effects that this could have, because to be honest, I've considered to be only positive up until now, where I was like, oh yeah, maybe there can be negative effects. No, so I know there can be negative effects because that's why we have the safety tools. But I had not considered them as being consequences for what I would be trying to accomplish with, using tabletop role-playing games as a therapeutic tool. Roslet and Stauffer worked with TTRPGs more in depth and utilized it in tandem with Goffman's social roles and Adlerian play therapy in a weekend RPG camp. Utilizing this model, the target audience for the group therapeutic work was gifted children that may have underdeveloped socially or emotionally in comparison to their peers. So, exactly theater kids, exactly engineers. I feel like a lot of the times when somebody's like maybe homeschooled, going to a specialty school, in gifted programs, in programs with older kids, these are exactly the kids who might have that draw to D&D more, because the kids that are underdeveloped socially or emotionally in comparison to their peers, that's exactly those categories of people. Concerns about the mismatch that displays in many gifted children in the form of lag in development of social understanding, cues, and comfortability become the target behavior. Many gifted children have an acute issue with comparison to their peers, global worry about the world and future, as well as preoccupation with death. Sorry, I'm just I'm getting called out here. These rumination issues were usually accompanied by excitable emotional status and heightened awareness of feelings. And the combination of so many maladaptive cognitive processes encouraged speculation on how it alters the way children perceive reality. Many of these children were turning out lonely, insecure, and anxious despite their development intellectually, physically, or artistically. Social interaction in the form of play seemed to be the most effective way to increase social skills and have good transference of skills, especially for the age group. The use of D&D in fantasy was a crucial part for the research on its projective abilities for identity and communication, comfort for children. There's evidence to support, I'm going to stop smacking my lips. There's evidence to support that in this framework, fantasy settings and stories have the ability to promote self-awareness and growth in children, and the roleplay aspect can have implications for collaborative social skill acquisition. Freedom expressed in interpretation of the self was an important aspect of the work that encouraged individuals to engage with themselves and others more fully. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally in. I'm totally in for this. I think one of the things that I tend to make my games in sort of like a confidence training way, where if somebody is scared to take risks, I make the risks so much more enticing. And it keeps doing it until they jump off. And I feel like I like build them up in that kind of way because I just like seeing people take risk. And it's more interesting. And it's more fun when people are taking risk. Yes, you can lose, but yes, you can also win when you do something. And I think like still having it be a choice is the important part. They have to choose to jump rather than being pushed off a cliff. That's the difference. And that's what I think actually builds and stretches their comfort zone for them to actually make more confident decisions. Abbott researched D&D and its connection to social anxiety in 2021, right after the full hit of the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to the quarantine, other variables in the last decades, social anxiety and loneliness have hit a new high. The researchers has proposed a solution in the form of D&D. This proposition seemed to be an answer into the issues. So this is kind of the pandemic and answering issues. Abbott note the difficulties lessened throughout the process of playing the game, where they strategized to have a GM with experience oversee. Okay, this is basically their. This is interesting. Okay, cool. One example highlighted from the experience was one where the players had encountered a sand trap and had to make a swift decision to ensure the safety of their characters. When faced with this decision to be quick and feeling the pressure to make a right decision, facilitators and the GM were able to help the process along and found that the players, though initially nervous, were still excited to see what would come next, regardless of making a right or wrong choice. The analysis conducted that members of the party that played with the GM found confidence in the ability to confront things they may have. Dude, I literally just talked about this, dude. I literally just talked about this, and that makes me so happy that they were able to make a decision. I'm gonna crack my phone screen if I keep tapping it with my gripper. Yeah, that makes me so happy. Like situations like that is basically like why I run. That and it's fun. So and I like making stories. But seeing them not being concerned about the right or wrong choice and then just doing something, dude, that is so nice. That is so nice. Members of the party told personal recountings of moments they felt empowered and understood how to speak up for themselves. Oh, despite having worries or negative thoughts about doing so in the first place. That's what this is the biggest paragraph in this whole thing, dude. This paragraph is so huge. The D&D had proven to be a good teacher and stepping stone for the party members of the group and a learning experience overall for the practitioners and patients both. More modern research has shown that D&D and TTRPGs can be applied to a therapeutic setting when working specifically with groups that study with social anxiety, phobias, and social connectedness, autism spectrum disorder, and depression, including some limited research on effects on trauma and PTSD. While research on D&D and TTRPGs as treatments for various mental health concerns, most leaning towards a less severe place, there are still many opportunities and works on its usage in therapy with more severe and involved treatments for complex trauma. Okay. When looking at the usage of different types of therapy used to treat PTSD, okay. Current research, LARPing, military sims. This goes over different types. And all right, let's read this future direction and then conclusion, and I'll conclude from there. The literature that currently exists on the usage of tabletop role-playing games as treatment for PTSD is scarce in full experimental design regarding PTSD specifically. There is, however, a plethora of qualitative work done by many researchers and dissertation work, full article journals, and case studies, though this research is helpful and rich in data supporting people's perception of D&D in therapeutic spaces. All this work is completely qualitative, and none utilize a control group or are able to make claims of a causational relationship. I don't think to me, that's not necessarily an issue, but academically and from a research perspective, maybe on their side, it's like, ooh, we need like a causational relationship. But I think a correlational relationship is enough for me. And then, like, the more positive the correlates are, like, the more, on board I am. But that's just me. That's my take on it. I think finding a causational relationship is incredibly hard. Even in things that you think are causational relationships, I think it's still incredibly hard. Like, things that are outside of physics, like anything psychology related, trying to find a causational relationship is just like, dude, like, what are we doing? But correlational and then high degrees of correlational, like high positive correlation, I think or even high negative correlation is all information you can use to inform decisions you're making. So, yeah, that's good. That's good enough for me. Research done in the field has only evaluated the thoughts from case studies or qualitatively analyze the feelings of the experience and lack a formal way to claim efficacy in treatment. There have also been no specific focus on PTSD or CPTSD alone. Often, works will include other mental illnesses, measures, or diagnoses, some of the most common ones being depression, anxiety, and bipolar. Unfortunately, this may not paint a full picture of exactly how D&D and TTRPGs can be utilized in a therapeutic scope for treating trauma and stand up to regular imaginal exposure therapy or narrative therapy practices alone. The literature may be lacking in much quantitative and generalizable information. This work on perception and qualitative data can be a jumping point for many researchers. Conducting a formal test over a period of treatment time while utilizing guidelines of therapeutic role-playing games in a study up against imaginal exposure or other evidence-based practices like EMDR, which is, what is EMDR? EMDR, is that electromagnetic? What is EMDR? Let me look it up on my phone to check out what EMDR was. EMDR therapy. Oh, I remember this. This is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Yeah, it's like you can help people heal from trauma reducing their emotional impact through bilateral stimulation, like eye movements, taps, or sounds. So interesting. That's really interesting to me. But one of the other things I'm very interested in is sound therapy, using the Tibetan singing bowls, but we don't have to talk about that now. Conducting a formal test over a period of treatment time while utilizing guidelines of therapeutic role-playing games in a study. We read this. Key questions arise in just how effective this level of imaginal exposure combined with fantasy may provide, how we can improve or work upon the game to make it more useful for many types of trauma treatment, and how we can standardize TTRPG gaming in the therapy space. Conclusion: the nature of TTRPGs and roleplay is one that lends itself to creativity, self-discovery, and one that emphasizes our natural social nature as human beings. Agree with that statement entirely. I agree with that entirely. This game has been used in many therapeutic settings, specifically ones involving social anxiety and other mental health issues on psychological support. While the nature of this work on PTSD and trauma is limited, the core tenets of the game can heavily impact and help individuals with trauma through a framework that encourages group support, imaginal exposure, and generates discussion around issues that may need a voice through fantasy. So I agree with that entirely. This conclusion essentially it does a very good job of summing up why I think it's beneficial for TTRPGs to be used in therapy. And, I'm making it one of my goals to do that for veterans and their PTSD and CPTSD, whether it's before or after service. Um, so yeah, I mean, this was a great read. I'm looking to do more article readings like this, maybe every Saturday or something like that, where I'm just reviewing more research. But yeah, I'm gonna go.